"That house belongs to me," my brother shouted across the courtroom. "She never paid a dime for Mom's care." Every head turned toward me. I stood up slowly and looked him straight in the eyes. "Are you sure you want to say that under oath?" I asked. He laughed. A few relatives smiled with him. They thought the case was already over. Then the judge looked down at the paperwork and said, "Before we continue, I'd like to see one missing bank record." The room went silent. My brother's smile faded. "My name is Rachel Bennett and I'm 35 years old. I'm a registered nurse at a small community hospital in Ohio. For years, my days started before sunrise and ended long after dark. I spent 12 hours helping strangers through the hardest moments of their lives, then drove straight to my mother's house to care for her until she fell asleep. Most evenings, the smell of fresh medicine mixed with homemade soup filled the kitchen while I sorted her pills, cleaned the house and helped her walk from room to room. I was tired almost every day, but I never complained because she had spent my entire childhood putting me first. My older brother, Daniel, rarely visited. When he did, it was usually for 20 minutes with a grocery bag or a bouquet of flowers that everyone else could see. He always arrived when relatives happened to be visiting. They praised him. "You're such a good son." He smiled every single time. Nobody saw him leave before Mom needed help getting into bed. Nobody saw me stay until midnight washing dishes, paying bills online, or making sure her oxygen machine was working before I finally drove home. I wasn't rich. I wasn't glamorous. I wasn't the person everyone noticed when I entered a room. But I had something they didn't expect. I kept every promise I made. I've always been quiet. Some people mistake quiet people for weak people. My family certainly did. They thought if they spoke loudly enough I'd eventually give up. They confused kindness with surrender. They were wrong. I never imagined those years of sacrifice would end inside a courtroom, fighting the one person who should have known the truth better than anyone. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to say something. If you've ever carried your family through difficult times without anyone thanking you, this story is for you. Some of the strongest people work behind the scenes where nobody notices. If you've sacrificed for someone you love and still felt invisible, please subscribe. Have you ever done everything right and still been treated like you did nothing? If that sounds familiar, click hype or leave a like before we continue. I'd truly love to hear your story too. My mother passed away quietly on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was holding her hand. Daniel arrived almost an hour later. He hugged a few relatives, wiped away a couple of tears, and immediately started asking practical questions. "What happens to the house now?" I stared at him. Our mother hadn't even been gone 2 hours. The funeral was difficult, but I kept my emotions under control because I wanted to honor her memory. A week later, our family gathered in my aunt's living room to discuss what came next. The coffee had gone cold. Nobody touched the cookies sitting on the table. Daniel stood up first. "The house should be mine," he announced confidently. "I'm the son. Mom always wanted me to have it." I blinked. "That's not true," I replied calmly. He pointed directly at me. "You only showed up because you wanted the property." The room became painfully quiet. Then my aunt nodded. "I've wondered about that myself." My stomach dropped. My cousin folded his arms. "Daniel said he handled most of your mother's expenses." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I paid her medical bills," I answered. "I paid overdue taxes. I covered mortgage payments when she couldn't." Daniel laughed. "Can you prove it?" Several relatives exchanged doubtful looks. Nobody asked me another question. Nobody defended me. Instead, they started discussing how quickly the house should be transferred to Daniel after probate. I felt invisible inside my own family. A month later, I received legal papers. Daniel had officially filed a lawsuit. According to his attorney, I had manipulated our mother during her illness and pressured her into changing financial arrangements for my own benefit. Reading those accusations made my hands shake. They weren't just lies. They attacked everything I had sacrificed. When our attorneys exchanged evidence, Daniel submitted selected bank statements and payment records that seemed to support his story. At first glance, everything looked convincing. Then came another blow. My aunt agreed to testify against me. So did 2 cousins who had watched me care for Mom for years. They claimed Daniel had always been the responsible one. I barely recognized the people speaking about me. On the morning our court hearing began, I reviewed every document with my attorney one final time. Something felt wrong. One important bank statement from years earlier had completely disappeared. It wasn't missing by accident. Someone had made sure it couldn't easily be found. I couldn't stop thinking about that missing bank statement. It bothered me all the way home from court. I knew I had seen it before. I remembered printing it years earlier because it matched one of the mortgage payments I had made for Mom. That document wasn't just another piece of paper. It connected several months of payments that proved exactly who had been keeping the house afloat. The next morning I still went to work. Patients didn't know my family was falling apart, and they deserved my full attention. I smiled when they needed comfort. I listened when they were afraid. But every quiet moment between patients, my mind drifted back to the lawsuit. When my shift ended, I drove to Mom's house. Walking through the front door hurt more than ever. The living room felt strangely empty. At first I couldn't figure out why. Then I noticed it. Her favorite rocking chair was gone. The old photo albums had disappeared from the bookshelf. Even the small music box Dad had given her before he passed away was missing. I stood there frozen. Daniel had been inside the house. Without telling me. Without permission. I called him immediately. "Where's Mom's furniture?" "It's family property," he answered casually. "I took what belonged to me. The estate hasn't even been settled. I wasn't going to let you sell everything first. I never said I was selling anything." He laughed. "You don't have much choice anymore." He hung up. I leaned against the kitchen counter trying to steady my breathing. It wasn't about the furniture. It was about respect. Every missing item carried a memory, and he treated those memories like objects he could grab before anyone stopped him. A few days later, another betrayal arrived. My aunt called to tell me I wasn't welcome to help organize the memorial reception. "We think it's better if Daniel handles everything," she said. "I took care of Mom every day," I replied quietly. "We're trying to avoid drama." "Drama? You know what I mean." "No," I answered. "I really don't." She ended the call. I stared at my phone for several minutes. The same people who watched me sacrifice years of my life were now acting as if I had been nothing more than a visitor. The memorial came and went. I wasn't asked to speak. Daniel stood in front of everyone telling stories about how close he had been to Mom. People clapped politely. I sat in the back row. No one asked why the person who spent the most time with her had remained silent. Then things became even worse. One afternoon, while buying groceries, an elderly neighbor approached me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "I heard you were planning to sell your mother's home right after she passed away." I stared at her. "Who told you that?" She looked uncomfortable. "Your brother." I felt something inside me break. Over the next week I learned Daniel had repeated that story to neighbors, church members, and even some of Mom's old friends. According to him, I had only cared for our mother because I wanted the house. Some people believed him. Others stopped returning my calls. Even church felt different. Conversations became shorter. Smiles became forced. I could feel people watching me. Still, I refused to fight back with gossip. The truth didn't need shouting. It needed proof. Every evening after work, I spread papers across Mom's dining room table. Receipts. Medical invoices. Canceled checks. Insurance statements. Tax records. I compared dates, highlighted transactions, and organized everything into folders. Sometimes I worked until 2 in the morning. Sometimes I cried while reading Mom's handwritten notes thanking me for paying another bill. But every tear reminded me why I couldn't quit. Daniel, meanwhile, grew more confident. One afternoon I overheard him outside the courthouse speaking with one of our cousins. "This case is finished," he said. "Rachel doesn't have anything. She'll settle before trial. I almost feel sorry for her." They laughed together. I kept walking. There was no point arguing. Not yet. That night I opened one final storage box from Mom's closet. Inside were old utility bills, greeting cards, and folders labeled by year. As I sorted through them, something caught my attention. Several account numbers matched. But one monthly statement was missing between 2 consecutive months. Everything else was perfectly organized. Only that single document had vanished. I looked closer at the payment history. Without that statement, it appeared Daniel had made a large mortgage payment. With it, I suspected the truth would be completely different. Someone hadn't misplaced that record. Someone had removed it on purpose. That realization changed everything. Because if one document had been deliberately hidden, then someone already knew it had the power to destroy the entire lie. And for the first time since Mom died, I stopped feeling afraid. I started feeling ready. I'll finish the story with the final confrontation, resolution, and closing. The next morning I called my attorney and told her about the missing statement. I think someone removed it on purpose, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then let's find out who didn't want the court to see it. Later that afternoon I received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end sounded familiar. Rachel, this is Harold Simmons. I smiled despite everything. Mr. Simmons had been my parents' attorney for many years before retiring. I heard about the lawsuit, he said gently. I think I may be able to help. An hour later we met in his office. The room smelled of old books, polished wood, and fresh coffee. He listened without interrupting while I explained everything. When I finished, he nodded. Your mother was a careful woman, he said. She worried this might happen one day. He walked to a filing cabinet and unlocked a drawer. Inside were copies of documents he had been authorized to keep years earlier. Among them were signed letters, payment summaries, and certified copies of financial records. Then he pulled out one familiar sheet of paper. I stared at it. The missing bank statement. I thought this had disappeared. It disappeared from your family's files, he replied. Not from mine. I felt tears fill my eyes. He placed the document on the desk. This statement changes everything. The record clearly showed the mortgage payment came directly from my personal checking account. It also listed transfers I had made for Mom's medical treatments, overdue property taxes, and utility bills. Even more important, it revealed several withdrawals Daniel had made from Mom's account for expenses completely unrelated to her care. Mr. Simmons looked at me. We'll authenticate every document before court. I nodded. For the first time in months, I finally believed the truth had a chance. Neither Daniel nor the rest of the family knew we had found the missing record. We kept it completely confidential. When the final hearing arrived, Daniel walked into the courtroom looking relaxed. He smiled at relatives sitting behind him. He barely looked at me. His attorney called him to testify first. I paid nearly every major expense for my mother, Daniel said confidently. I handled the mortgage. I covered medical bills. I did everything my sister claimed she did. His words echoed through the courtroom. Then the judge began reviewing the exhibits. After several minutes, she frowned. Counsel, she said, looking toward both attorneys, there appears to be a gap in the financial records for one particular month. My heart started beating faster. The judge continued. I would like to review the corresponding bank statement before I make any findings. Daniel shifted in his seat. His attorney shuffled through a binder. We don't appear to have that document, Your Honor. Our attorney stood. We do. The courtroom became perfectly still. She handed the certified copy to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. The judge read silently for several moments. Then she looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Bennett, would you explain why this statement shows your sister making the mortgage payment you testified paying yourself? Daniel swallowed. I don't remember. The judge turned another page. And why does it show Ms. Bennett paying thousands of dollars for medical care during that same period? He looked at his attorney. No answer came. The judge continued reviewing the documents. There are also withdrawals from your mother's account that appear unrelated to her care. Daniel finally spoke. She told me I could use that money. Mr. Simmons quietly handed another letter to our attorney. She presented it immediately. The letter was signed by my mother. It specifically stated that Daniel was never authorized to withdraw money for personal use. The judge looked back at him. Did you testify under oath that you personally covered these expenses? Yes. Based on these records, that testimony appears to be false. The room fell silent. I could hear nothing except the ticking wall clock. One by one, my relatives lowered their eyes. Nobody defended Daniel now. My aunt looked ashamed. My cousins avoided looking at me altogether. The judge spoke firmly. The documentary evidence overwhelmingly supports Ms. Bennett's account. She continued. The court finds that Ms. Bennett provided substantial financial support and caregiving for her mother. The plaintiff's testimony lacks credibility and is directly contradicted by authenticated banking records. A wave of relief washed over me. After months of lies, the truth finally had a voice. The lawsuit was dismissed. The house remained legally mine exactly as my mother intended. The court also referred Daniel's false statements for further legal review. Outside the courthouse, reporters weren't waiting. There was no applause. No dramatic celebration. Just quiet justice. A few relatives approached me. "I'm sorry," my aunt whispered. "I should have believed you." I nodded politely. "I hope you believe the truth next time before believing the loudest person." I didn't say it with anger. I said it with peace. Some apologies heal. Others simply arrive too late. Over the following months, I repaired the house room by room. I brought back family photographs. I found another rocking chair that looked almost identical to Mom's old one. Every corner reminded me of her kindness instead of the courtroom. As for Daniel, we stopped speaking. Not because I hated him. Because trust, once broken that deeply, cannot be rebuilt with words alone. People often ask whether winning the case felt satisfying. The answer surprises them. Keeping the house wasn't the greatest victory. Keeping my integrity was. The strongest proof isn't the loudest voice. It's the truth that survives every lie. If your own family has ever tried to take something that rightfully belonged to you, then you already know how deeply that kind of betrayal hurts. I'd love to hear your story in the comments because someone reading it may realize they aren't alone. Subscribe if you believe honesty will always outlast manipulation. Click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Standing up for yourself is never easy, especially when the people hurting you share your last name. If you've lived through something similar, subscribe and become part of this community. Let me know this story meant something to you by clicking hype. And tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel.